Hello, everybody. We're really excited to have you join us for the Niswonger Remote Learning Series. Sessions are going to provide educators opportunities to extend and refine their practices, engaging students in remote and online learning. We will showcase high-impact practices, model strategies, share resources, and highlight ways to facilitate effective remote learning. And although you'll see that many of the strategies and resources we share are applicable to in-classroom traditional learning, you're going to see a whole lot of virtual opportunities too, we hope. My name is Catherine Edwards, and my co-presenter is Sarah Kitzmiller. So, first of all, you remember on Zoom, we always have this slide in our presentations, and if you've been with us before, you've seen it. So we'll just go ahead and go to the next slide. And there's our names and how we can be contacted. It's really easy, our first initial and our last names, and of course, niswongerfoundation.org. So we would love to hear from you at any point, even if you see this presentation by video. Please let us know if you have any questions. This is a little bit of plugging for what's going to happen. We've had 3 previous sessions, and you can see the dates there, and all of those are can be found in the materials site. You'll see that, and they can be accessed anytime, and you can play with them and share them. Feel free to share with your colleagues or your school, whatever you need to do. And in September on the 22nd, we're going to have an hour-long session, and it's going to kind of be a deep dive into all the things we've talked about, checks for understanding, and the slant will be a whole lot of virtual learning and online learning because of where we are in our world today. And we know how teachers are struggling and trying to keep their heads above the water. So we invite you to come to that session, and just looking forward to seeing you. I found this Bitmoji. You know, that's kind of the craze right now on the internet. And I belong to a couple of groups, and I saw this and I kind of stole it, but I just thought it was so appropriate. You see the teacher in the floor in the fetal position, and the burning piano, and the burning computer, and the books, and send help. It just, we all feel like that. And even though we're all experienced in this presentation, we're all very experienced educators. We've been teachers, administrators, coaches. We feel that too because this is new for us. But we have really enjoyed doing our deep dives and trying to help teachers be a little bit more effective. And really, we've also just done some hand-holding and some cheerleading with the teachers we worked with. So if you feel like that, you're not alone. One of our colleagues that really works with all the coaches at Niswonger a whole lot, when we were kind of hashing out the sessions and talking about things, we asked her if we could quote her, because if you pick up one thing from this session, we're giving you permission that not to have the fanciest Canvas page or the Google Classroom. We're giving you permission to still be an effective teacher. You need to be spending time on the learning goals, not the tools. The tools are there, and they're fun, and they're important. But it's not about competing for the best page. It's about the learning goals for the students and what you want to get done. So we thank Teresa Gibson, our colleague, for this. Today's session, we hope this is what you get. And please note, we're socially distanced up there in our chairs. We didn't have masks. I couldn't find one with masks, but I'm absolutely sure they're socially distanced. Participants will understand the purpose for checking for understanding, and this is important both brick and mortar classrooms and virtually. And participants will explore checks for understanding and some strategies to support learning in the virtual setting. But if you, like all teachers, you're creative, you're smart, you're intelligent, and every day you adjust things to what you need. So if you're using this for a training session, or we'll ask some of our participants today, we won't spend a whole lot of time here. We might even get through a little bit early. But what are you doing to check for understanding in your classroom, your virtual classroom? I wrote down some ideas and some things I've seen. And Sarah and Bethany, I want y'all to feel free to jump in. I've seen things like thumbs up. And by the way, we old coaches use this all the time when we're in meetings, like, yes, I understand. Because we have to be checked for understanding as we're learning things. I have seen students hold up whiteboards or pieces of paper. I have seen teachers use, like in a third grade classroom, I watched a teacher who wanted to see the students read passages. The students had the passages, so the students used Flipgrid and were told what paragraphs to read, and they read, and then they submitted it, and the teacher could hear the reading and the ability and the level. And then the same activity, the students had to take what they read and create small paragraphs, and then they read the paragraphs back to the teacher. And I thought, now, and there were so many things being taught here, good computer skills for sending things back to the teacher, writing, working by yourself, collaborating with the teacher, and of course the teacher got to hear the young student read. Of course, there's all kinds of different kinds of programs and things you can find on the computer for checking, and we're going to talk about those a little bit. But you know what? Sometimes just a thumb up or a nod or that's good or is there a problem? That's okay too. Any of y'all have any ideas?
Well, one of the things I have seen that my own child has done that I've really liked is where if they're reading a passage and it's the teacher's leading it, that the kids have to turn in the passage in Google with the evidence highlighted first before they're allowed to submit their plan. And I just feel like it's great as a reinforcement of the practice of reading and rereading. And also, are you sticking to the topic by making sure that you have that first step? So can you kind of prove what you are getting ready to write about? So they always know that the writing is coming after. So there's sometimes groans, but at the same time, it holds them accountable to having read that text. And then they have visual evidence that they can check pretty quickly.
That's a great example. And also they're learning how to use the tools on the computer, because with state testing, they are expected, and they can, as they take state tests, they can highlight passages. They can do those things all on the computer. So, you know, that is great. They're getting that practice, and they be one less thing that they stress about when they take state tests. Okay.
Catherine, I'll add a couple.
Sure.
From my son, he's in middle school, 7th grade. He's in band, and so they often use Flipgrid to show that they understand how to play a piece that they've been studying in a particular way on their instrument, or just show they understand how to play certain scales. And so they were doing that even back in the spring when we first all went to virtual. That band teacher went straight to Flipgrid, and every day they had to submit some type of practice video. And then also I've been pretty impressed. Some of his teachers, kind of a low stakes way to check for understanding, just use the discussion thread in Canvas, post, a prompt, like something that's really critical to understanding, gave some sentence stems for kids to use as a scaffold for that discussion, both in their original post, and then also her expectation that they post on at least 2 classmates' comments and kind of keep that discussion going. And I also love that the teacher included not really a word bank's not the right word, but it was like a box of like, hey, I want to hear you use these vocabulary words in your discussion. And that's going to give me an idea that you understand this topic, because you're going to be using the vocabulary of the topic. So I thought that was really neat too.
Yeah. And that just reminded me what an art teacher did. I saw an art teacher, they gave the student a project, and the student had to get on Flipgrid and show the finished product, but then had to talk about the process. Well, I did this and I did this, and I thought, and you know, the student was so proud of their artwork, and then it getting to explain it. It may have been a better lesson than in real life.
I love that.
For sure.
So we're not going to go over all of this for time's sake, but this is a slide that really kind of spoke to us. You know, and there's the article is attached down at the bottom. So if you want to see where we got this from, feel free. This will show up in the materials section if you go and look at where we put all our materials and our research that we used. But you know, there's different ways for checking for understanding. I think one of the things is just know the purpose, and that's, we highlighted it because that's kind of the focus today, is know the purpose. Remember, there was something you wanted to teach the learners. It wasn't about creating razzle dazzle. It was some goal, some standard, some concept that you wanted to get through. You know, and just like in the real classroom, you want to collect data and keep things going. And of course, just like the real classroom, you want to provide oral and written feedback. Sarah and I talked today about, we know of cases where the students aren't necessarily getting a whole lot of feedback from virtual learning. And that's kind of a shame, because they need to hear, instead of just repeating the same mistakes over and over, but they also need to be told, hey, that's pretty good. And then, you know, it's an opportunity for some personal conversations, like, you know, asking the student, oh, are you sitting at your kitchen table? You know, just those kinds of things. It just makes a connection. And of course, all of this is a big, big focus on checking for social and emotional learning, making the student feel like it's important that they're there. Sarah?
Well, and so one of the things we hope that you can absolutely, it's sort of our implied goal here, is that, yeah, we recognize that there are tons of really awesome tools out there, and we wish we had enough time to go over all of them. But we know, just like you know, that there's only so much we can handle. And especially right now, we want to make sure that you feel like you understand the main key here, and that once you do that, you can let go of the pressure of having to master a million different things to make your lesson creative. Because if you really know your purpose, you can really start to take things off your plate, because it will help you identify what's working and what you need to focus on. So the teacher thinking while planning for this sounds like, what opportunities can I plan to support learning in my virtual classroom? And there's really two ways that we're going to talk about today. Are you with me? And it focuses really, we could call this procedural, but it focuses on engaging with learners, reinforcing, redirecting, responding, repeating, supporting SEL, building class culture, increasing engagement, targeting participant behavior, dare I say classroom management. That's what falls under the question, are you with me? And are students understanding the content? Critical here. Focusing on understanding what my students know and my instructional next steps. Reteach, reinforce, respond, repeat. Support students' mastery of standards, highlight student understandings and common misunderstandings. So we have to give voice to what we are seeing that they know and celebrate that and let them know we're proud of them for doing that, but then also address what we're seeing as common things that kids aren't getting and really responding to that in real time. And that's difficult in a virtual world, we realize. So key idea number one, are students with me? What are some things that we can do? Well, we kind of talked a little bit about this, are students with me? I want you to consider these things as we watch this video. What is the benefit of this strategy? And how do you currently use this or see yourself using this strategy, especially those of you that have more than 10 kids joining a Zoom call or a Google Meet? This is a great way, even if you're having kids work with each other, to use this kind of language in a lot of different settings in your classroom so that you don't have to keep reteaching something different when they're in a different setup. So let's watch this video and we'll reflect on these questions.
Discussions in a physical classroom are tricky to manage. and conducting them by video adds a whole new level of complexity. Good discussions are inclusive, equitable, and respectful. An agreed-upon set of hand signals can reduce interruptions, allow more time to consider ideas, and provide a safe space that engages all learners. A pinky and thumb extended indicates agreement with the speaker. A single index finger expresses disagreement. One fist on top of the other shows that a student wants to build on what a classmate is saying. A raised pinky finger lets everyone know the student has a question. Making air quotes shows that a student can paraphrase a quote or concept. Students can use them to participate non-verbally, indicate when they want to speak, and how they'd like to contribute. At the beginning of every discussion, it helps to configure your screen so your view includes as many students as possible at one time. Review the hand signals so they are fresh in everyone's minds. Encourage students to use the signals to show they are engaged in the conversation, whether they plan to speak or not. Reinforce the importance of both speaking and listening by acknowledging nonverbal and verbal participants by name. With a little bit of practice, these hand signals can boost engagement and make for more equitable discussions by allowing more students to participate in ways that feel comfortable.
And so as we think about this, sorry, my video is not allowing me to go back to the non-full screen. Escape. There we go. Short video, but basically this idea that we have signals instead of using our words invites more people to the discussion is something worthy of our time to explore in our virtual classroom, because we definitely want to boost engagement, and a lot of times the pressure or the environment that the child is in could be preventing them from turning on their screen. And so if there was a low risk way for them to participate or add communication without having to use their voice, that can sometimes help them. I know on our Zoom, we do have the feature of the thumbs up. So that would be a great place to start that you already have built into the platform that we're using today, for example. So that was just a real quick kind of looking at that. Catherine, if you.
Okay. And you know, something I really like there, it reinforced that we need to know our students' names.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. Even virtually, we need to know. And that's been kind of tough because a lot of these classes came on board without ever meeting the teacher. So how do we engage our virtual students? Well, again, we need to get to know them some way, whether it be some kind of and maybe more than one activity where they get an opportunity to do some sharing. And it can be a confidential thing. It can be a private thing. Use what you know through interest surveys and collaboration and online. I hate to use the word games, but there are some fun opportunities for kids. And you find out what their interests are, you know that you're going to be able to tie some of those interests virtually into their learning. This one's a little tough. There are some school systems that are not letting the students have a lot of peer collaboration. I have often thought, as I've watched what's been going on for the last month, it's a shame that you don't tell your students that you're going to have lunch from this time to this time and let the students literally just talk while they eat with each other on camera. I hope somebody's thinking of that. I'm not in any kind of position to make that suggestion, but I think, I know the kids never did get to really say goodbye last spring, and they were so excited about seeing each other. There are lots of ways through technology to create small groups. It could be through rooms, if that's appropriate, if it can be used in your school system. But when you can use some small group learning, maybe as we go back into the 25% and 50% student participation, we can do some small grouping, and it might only be 2 or 3 students, but that's better than nothing. And then, of course, the scaffold and practice the content as you're planning. I can't repeat just how important it is to scaffold a lesson and be able to stop and check in. Research says you should be checking in and doing getting some kind of feedback from your learners, and this includes adults, like 8 to 15 minutes. Are you stopping, and are you allowing students to let you know, are they getting it? Are they not getting it? They have questions. So I don't like to read off of slides, but I think this one's worth reading. The best thing we can give kids this school year is not a new curriculum or technology. It's an empathetic heart that sees and hears theirs. And that's our, just like teaching the standards, don't lose yourself, don't lose your love and your respect for your students and your families in the technology.
So when you think about assessing the opportunity, what are some opportunities that we have outside of just the regular, time we have with the kids on the Zoom call? What are other ways that we can kind of think about this idea of "Are you with me?" And so we have kids that aren't attending our sessions or that never turn on their video camera. And so it would be a best practice to think about reinforcing the idea of participation and attendance and letting them develop their voice in the classroom. So how can we do that? And it really is just as simple as recording your classroom instruction and maybe designating a special place in your Canvas or Google Classroom where you're housing this information. It's going to be great for your kids that are homebound temporarily, maybe due to COVID, or kids that are absent, or kids who just need to reteach or relearn something. It's great for parents to be able to access, or grandparents who are supporting kids in that virtual platform after, before mom and dad get home. So record your instruction. Use Screencast-O-Matic or Screencastify to record any direct instruction. So not only think about recording your Zoom calls as a way to capture your teaching and your conversation your classes have, but if there's anything that you don't have to have class discussion about, think about that as a teacher and how you can record that information prior to it being shared. Because again, kids need to have access to that content, not just once, but multiple times. So that accessibility is a huge piece here too to student success. Utilize the caption feature. You're going to be able to be speaking, and I meant to turn that on while we were in here today, but they're also going to be able to read across the screen your words. Communicate with students and families, and not just communicate, "Hey, where are you?" But think about planting the seed first of what we're talking about. Are you with me? And so, we missed you. Where are you? Might be off-putting. Starting your letter or the communication with something heartfelt, like Catherine was talking about earlier in her quote that she shared. This idea that it is important to communicate to the child that you miss them and that they missed something important today and the class was asking about them, because that's going to encourage them to engage if they're struggling with that. But I would not just email or communicate that to the child. I would also, even if the child attends your class, I would also say, "Hey, I would really like it if you could open up your video." Obviously, if there's a reason they can't or they don't feel comfortable, that's one thing, but just attempting to let them know that that would be the preference, to see their smiling face, is going to mean a lot to them because they want to know that they matter. Any opportunity to do that is going to be helpful.
Never forget that one of the hardest things teachers, administrators of schools from K through high school, we're always looking for ways for parent engagement. So, and I like these questions here because they were only just really powerful questions for planning a lesson, but have you asked your students? Have you asked the parents at the end, say at the end of 10 days? What is working? What is not working? And what would you recommend? You might be surprised that you get some feedback that you just didn't think about. Again, I just can't say enough that, the virtual learning is new for all of us. And it's new for parents and it's new for students. So don't be afraid to ask, these questions. These questions maybe should kind of guide your lessons.
Well, and I really think these are great too, Catherine. I love your point that this idea that we have to incorporate practices that we know work in the classroom, that we're going to do in the classroom anyway. So reaching out on a regular basis and giving parents the opportunity to address these on a weekly basis or on a bi-monthly basis, that kind of thing. That way parents know that you are taking their input and reacting to it. So often we react to things because we feel or believe that we didn't do what we were supposed to do or we should have done something different. This way, if we give parents the opportunity to provide us with that information, we have some grounds and some data to really make decisions that are going to impact the parents, and particularly the parents in each of our class periods. So it's odd sometimes, but I have heard teachers say that there's some classes they have that have a preference. This is a great way to tailor and personalize your setup for each classroom and support your parents and students at the same time. If parents are engaged and on the same page, then it's likely their child will be as well too. So it's kind of a win-win.
Hey, Sarah, I'll add too that as a parent, it's nice when the teacher initiates a chance for me to give feedback so I don't feel like I am that parent. Who has an idea and maybe wants to make a legitimate suggestion, but worries like, oh no, they're going to think I'm trying to micromanage something. But this would be easier for us on this end if, let's say, something in Canvas were easier to find or something of that nature. So it's just nice that it's offered.
Yeah, and it's a great way to just kind of give that to the parents to answer the question for us instead of us carrying that burden of worry around with us, like what is not working, what's working well, or I feel like this, or I think that, because we can make them crazy when parents are like, oh, this is great, or I really like this, and we may have not thought about it that way. So I absolutely agree too. As a parent myself, that's And so that's kind of thinking about sort of the engagement, the classroom management side of things of the learning process, which is extremely important and is something that needs to be revisited. We were even talking about saying the kid's name. Those things all play in to now getting to that deeper level of learning that we know has to occur in this virtual setting, which is standard and objective work towards proficiency in the grade level content that kids have to know by the end of the year, right? So the question now is, are students understanding the content? And so one of the things that we talked about were we don't need to know a dozen different strategies. So in our materials, in the materials document, I wanted to just bring attention to, you will have, we're going to watch a real quick Jamboard video, but you're going to have, depending on the different platforms you may be using, you will have different how-to videos that are saved in your materials guide so that you can quickly access how to set this up for you. If you have Canvas, if you have Zoom, if you have Google Meet, if you have a different setup, and again, I know that some of you may be watching this asynchronously. If that's the case, please email us with what your setup is. If we didn't address that, we would love to know what other platforms are being used and how we can tailor our information to serve you. And we can look for those videos that fit your platform. But we're going to watch this real quick video and just kind of consider, again, what is the benefit of this strategy? How do you currently use this or see yourself using this strategy in your own classroom?
Next example is essentially the next lesson that would happen in sequence with that previous lesson. And this is going to show you how you might sequence a tool like Jamboard and Flipgrid. So for this lesson, for the next day when I'm having students dig in a little bit more and do some more learning about this topic, I could send them to an article where they would read to learn about some of the engineering achievements of the ancient Romans. And then what students are going to do is open Jamboard. And when they open Jamboard, I'm going to have them add their name to a new page, and then add an image as well as some text that explains what they learned about one of those achievements. So when they get into the Jamboard, what they'll see here is either a teacher example or something that another student already did. And then they can also go in and review their peers' responses and then start to add their own. So to add their own response, they can add a sticky note with their name if they want at the top. And then if they want to add, or they need to add an image, so they're going to go down to image, add an image that they're going to find from Google. So for example, here I might say my example of roads again, and then these can be dragged around, resized, things like that, kind of however the student wants. They can add another sticky note to explain what this is, a complex system of roads. And then also change the color and drag that around, and then you can have them add an explanation about what they learned. So you can see that Google Jamboard is a great tool for having students jump in, post responses. Obviously, looks a little bit different, has some different functionality from Padlet. It can be a great teaching tool as well. So if this were my teacher slide and I wanted to be pointing things out and teaching things, there's this little laser pointer that I can use as well. And there's other things that you can do with Google Jamboard. Like all the other tools that I'm going to show, I have a full tutorial about how to use Google Jamboard that I definitely recommend you check it out if you feel like you want to use it. I will say one big downside of Google Jamboard is that students can essentially edit over each other's responses if you give them editing access. So there's no ways to give them like restricted editing access. So for example, a kid could go in and erase somebody else's work. So you're either going to have a conversation about digital citizenship if you're using Google Jamboard, or make sure they're staying on individual pages, or not care that much if they're kind of interacting in ways like that on each other's boards, because it's not, maybe you're not making it like super high stakes. Or you could essentially have these Jamboards set up. You could actually push them out through Google Classroom and have them be more like interactive notebooks that you're using just to have communication with your students, to give them feedback about work that they're doing, for example. Okay, so after they have posted in the Jamboard, what I'm going to have them do next is review each other's responses. So see what their classmates posted to the Jamboard to do a little bit of peer-to-peer learning here. And then.
All right.
Next example is essentially.
Okay, so as we saw in the Jamboard, it is an interactive tool, and it is something you'll need to consider. The first question, are you with me? Are you using this Jamboard correctly? Before you actually use Jamboard. So Jamboard is something that you could respond to a check for understanding. If kids aren't learning it, or if you have given a text as a response to maybe they need some more time with this material, and I want to see them pull more evidence from the text to show that they know, this is a great tool, a great strategy, and a great tool to use to get them to show you, hey, did this text help them with that misunderstanding? Did it help them build more knowledge around the topic? So this is just one way, and you could not just use this in ELA. It would work for science or social studies, as it looked like he was using some social studies text there. So there's a lot of creative ways to do it. I like how he also brought in the idea of pushing it out through Google Classroom if you were concerned about kids erasing other students' work. So again, you have at your ready ways to download and utilize Jamboard with Google Meet, Zoom, and Canvas in your materials. If you want to go back and do that, we just felt like it would be helpful since I'm so dependent right now on Google searching how to download, how to install. So we just thought we'd have this quick reference guide for you too in the materials. And so again, thinking about that, accessing the opportunity or ways that are right in front of us that we may not realize that we can reinforce this is, how do we reteach to support common misunderstandings students show in their work? I could easily ask here as well, how do we address the learning that is going well to give credit where credit is due so they know what they have done well? That's also important. But for this example, we're going to think about misunderstandings, and the word common is bolded here because that is what a check for understanding essentially is. It is an opportunity for me to address the majority of the students that are in front of me in the current moment of instruction, and it allows me to take that information and take action. So what does that mean? We're going to use student work to access what instruction worked as evidence, as our data, and then determine the reteaching needs. And it may not be in that moment that we have time to address it, which we'll have to be cognizant of. But that's okay. We could use asynchronous to our advantage in that way. And consider what resources are best. And then basically go in and do those things, create those small assignments. And then you're going to have to go back, right, and check for effectiveness. Did this work? Did this reteaching, did this time going deeper into the task really support students' understanding of the content they need to master? And giving that time and airspace to let them know what they did and how it impacted your understanding of what we need to do next. That is going to be, that's very much a cause and effect relationship, and students need to know that because it helps them feel heard, and it helps them feel like the instruction is personalized and tailored to their specific needs. It's that simple and that hard, right? So, all right.
This was a quote that we really liked. Teachers of high-performing online classes, in other words, read the virtual room and collect feedback, not just gauge how well students understand the subject matter, but also to identify any obstacles that may be preventing them from being able to fully participate. You'll see where that we got that quote from this article, and it's an excellent article. And so, you know, teachers, and this is the thing that comes through experience. We do learn how to read the room. Are our students, are they engaged? We learn our students. We learn characteristics of if they're engaged or not. Well, as we go through this virtual thing, you need to be thinking about how you're reading the room, and that's just another very important point, that you need the checks for understanding often. That way, if you are checking often, then you know you might not lose all of them to the Game Boy in their lap or something like that. So just and I do like in that previous video he talks about online citizenship. Well, you know, tell your students that you expect them to stay engaged when you're talking, and that they're going to have plenty of time for those other things. And you know, if they go to sleep on you or something like that, what would you do in the classroom? How would you treat that? You know, those are some situations, and even maybe some discipline issues that are going to arise. Have a plan and talk about it with your students, with your learners before it happens even.
Well, and I think too, there's a little bit of, I love that, Catherine, I love that quote and that idea that high performing online classes, they do exactly what we did in high performing classes in the classroom, in the building, right? And so this idea that if we know our purpose for why we're checking for understanding, if we know that purpose, we're going to be able to develop high quality instruction and experiences for our students that are personal, that make them feel included and engaged and have reason to engage, and allows us to let go of that pressure that we need to be a tech guru to be successful in this environment. You right now are essential in this space, and you have a lot to offer your students, and we know that the most important tool that any kid has access to is you. So we have to make sure that we are present and able to say ourselves, hey, look, we did this assignment yesterday, and Miss Kitzmiller really, I don't know what I was thinking, because I did not get to really test to see what you know. We're not going to spend any more time on that activity because it's not going in the direction I want it to. Be willing to talk about those things that you do yourself, and it helps the dialogue in your own classroom. So knowing your purpose and checking for understanding is really the most powerful weapon that you have in your toolbox, because it's going to help you identify what kids are doing, what kids need, and it's also going to require you to just take action doing what you've always done, being present and helping bring voice to what needs to be focused on, because you are essential, and you are the most invaluable tool that a student has in this virtual environment.
In closing, you know, if we had a longer session, we would love to hear about, and this is actually a good tool to be used when you're planning or with your students, and a good feedback tool. Ask your students to either write or tell you 3 things that they learned from the lesson, or 2 things that they want to learn more about, and what questions do they have about the presentation. So there's so many ways. Just these 3 simple questions can be used. And if we had time, we would have you tell us what you liked about our lesson, but you're forgiven today.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your attendance, and we look forward to seeing. I'm going to go back actually way back up here to I think it was our slide about our next session, Catherine, not to plug.
Okay.
But don't forget that if you weren't able to attend us today and you're watching this after the fact, that's great. We're glad you're here. We would love to see you as we dig even deeper into checking for understanding on the 22nd at 3:45. So we hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sarah.
Can I